Shelter in Place, my new novel, or Il Decoro, as it will be called in Italian, really started out with a fragment of a novel that I wrote in 2009, and then I dug out in 2016, around December 2016, right after the election of Trump, and it was a fragment of a novel about a woman who, in the wake of the election of Ronald Reagan, becomes convinced that America is going to take a turn toward fascism and decides that she needs to buy an apartment in Europe in order to have a place to escape to. In other words, a kind of the reverse of the story that I wrote about in my novel, The Two Hilltop Frankfurts, which was the story of the Jews who fled Europe through Lisbon to the United States. So the same story, but geographically reversed. It took me a while to figure out that the novel really ought not to be taking place after the election of Ronald Reagan. And so my first inclination was to move it up a few decades and set it right after the non-election of Al Gore, the stolen election of 2000, which was the year that I moved back to Florida. And then I realized, what the hell am I doing? This is about Trump. This is about the panic and terror of having someone you consider to be genuinely evil suddenly elected president of the country that you call home. Central to this novel is the idea of home as a place of safety and freedom, or at least the illusions of safety and freedom. And one of the questions that it asks is, how much can we trust those feelings? How safe are we at home? How free are we at home? Is it possible to be both safe and free when most people are neither? This was a sentiment that W.H. Auden expressed, and an idea that he wrestled with in his poem September 1st, 1939, some lines of which provide one of the epigraphs for the novel. When Auden writes, all the conventions conspire to make this fort assume the furniture of home. The idea that home must be a fort, a panic room, a bunker, a place of safety, but also, in a certain sense, imprisonment, has become even more relevant and more a question or an idea that I since the coronavirus pandemic has begun, and for that reason, it's a kind of irony that the novel is titled in English "Shelter in Place," a title that my American editor came up with long before the pandemic. And I remember at the time, the marketing people said, "I'm afraid most people won't be familiar enough with the term shelter in place." Little did they know. I'm now working on a sequel to the novel, which takes the same characters from about 2018 in Venice, where the apartment is being renovated, through the present day. It's difficult to be writing now about the world 2 years ago, because the world 2 years ago seems like history. The world 5 minutes ago seems like history. That is another important theme of the novel, the fact that there is no such thing as the present anymore. In the first draft of the novel, the apartment that Eva decides to buy as her escape hatch is in Paris. And at a certain point, well, as I was writing it, I decided to change it to Venice. Paris became Venice, or rather Venice became the place where Eva was going to buy her apartment. And that was an instinctive decision on my part that, in retrospect, I'm very glad that I made, because Venice now seems so much the city to look at. Venice, where the word quarantine comes from. Venice, which has survived so many plagues. Venice, which is, of course, the setting of Thomas Mann's Death in Venice, as well as Muriel Sparks' Territorial Rights, Henry James, The Aspirin Papers, to name just a few of the many great novels that have been set there. Um, so from New York, I'm moving on to Venice, and that is where I am mentally right now. I wish I were there physically. I hope and look forward to the day when I will be able to return.